railroads had been given as government subsidies. "You can lay track to the Garden of Eden," said the head of the Northern Pacific, "but what good is it if the only inhabitants are Adam and Eve?" Western states also contended with one another for new residents. The Homestead Act promised 160 acres of public land to any person who filed a claim, paid a $10 fee, and agreed to work the property for 5 years. In the 1870s, Kansas grew by more than 500,000 people. Nebraska's population quadrupled. 200 Scottish families settled on the Kansas-Nebraska border. The Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society lured Jews from Eastern Europe to Oregon, Colorado, Kansas, the Dakotas. German, Russian Mennonites, Swedish, Dutch, French, Bohemian, Irish, and Norwegian families were soon scattered across the plains.
In the villages of Europe, you might be only a few steps away from your neighbor. Certainly within hearing distance, you could hear the village's church bells ringing on a Sunday morning. Suddenly here they were isolated many miles from neighbors and from villages with long periods of time between any kind of interaction. They had wind sickness, they called it, from the constant blowing of the wind. They planted trees around their houses not simply for the shade or for the beauty, but to protect them from the immensity of the landscape.
They started towns like Lindsborg and Hoffnungsthal, New Alexanderval and Dannebrog, some with the same street plans as their old villages in Europe. And they planted wheat they had brought along from as far away as Russia. It flourished as no other domestic crop ever had before on the semi-arid plains, and would one day help make the United States the agricultural wonder of the world.
The men had farmed in many cases most of their lives. They'd had to struggle against roots and rocks and all of these things that made farming difficult. They looked around them here, and there were thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of acres without a root or a rock. They could put their plow in the ground and go miles and miles straight ahead without worrying about a hill. This was grass, ground, earth that had never been turned in all of history except maybe by a buffalo's horn. They said the first time a plow went through that ground, it sounded like the opening of a giant zipper from the grassroots tearing as the plow went through it. To them, this was a dream come true.
We seldom stop to think how desperately lonely it was. One of the tales I liked the best was about a woman who lived out West Texas. She seldom saw anybody up in the panhandle. A cowboy came through one time and brought her a sack that had 3 chickens in it. And she could not bring herself to kill those chickens. She said, "You will never know what good company they were." There was some core of that woman that embraced this raw country. But you see, it was her lot. Her husband goes off to round up the cattle on whatever adventure that he might have been on, and it was her lot to keep the homestead, to run the ranch, to care for his family. And so I think of that woman often with those 3 chickens. And I bet they were good company.
Surely the hand of providence must be in this, as it seems this desert, as it has been termed so long, has been specially reserved for the poor of our land, where they can find a home for themselves and families, and where they can enjoy the companionship of their loved ones, undisturbed by those that have heretofore held them under the most exclusive control. Uriah Oblinger.
In the summer of 1872, a Union veteran named Uriah Wesley Oblinger left his rented farm in Onward, Indiana, and set out with his brother and two brothers-in-law for Nebraska to claim the homestead to which his military service entitled him. His wife, Maddie, and infant daughter, Ella, were to wait at home until he sent for them.
October 6th, 1872. Dear wife and baby. Well, I suppose the first question you would ask me now would be, how do you like Nebraska? Wife, you can see just as far as you please here, and almost every foot in sight can be plowed. The longer I stay here, the better I like it. They're mostly young families, just starting in life the same as we are. And I find them very generous indeed. We'll all be poor here together. I am hunting a home for us where we can enjoy ourselves without being bothered doing as other people say. I can get along well enough through the week, but when Sunday comes, I feel a little lonesome without you. Give baby a kiss, yes, 2 of them, and take one yourself.
After more than a year of separation, Uriah Oblinger's long wait ended. His wife, Maddie, and daughter, Ella, along with a crate containing all their worldly goods and another filled with live chickens, finally arrived aboard the morning train. Uriah took them to their new home, built from prairie sod with his own hands, to begin their new life.
Dear Mother and Father, at home in our house, in a sod at that. We moved in last Wednesday, Uriah's birthday. It is not quite so convenient as a nice frame, but I would as soon live in it as the cabins I've lived in. I ripped our wagon sheet in 2, have it around the sides, and have several papers up. It looks real swell. The only objection I have is that we have no floor yet. Maddie Oblinger.
What a pleasure it is to work on one's own farm, for you can feel that it's yours and not for someone else. I would rather live as we do than have to rent and have someone bossing us.
Well, we have just come in from the truck patch and found the gophers had about cleaned the peas off all the vines. But our squash vines are full of bloom. We brought in beets just now that measured 1 foot in circumference, and potatoes almost...
Dear Grandpa, I have learned my letters and can spell axe and cat and dog and girl. I bother Ma and Pa considerable to get them to learn me. I'm learning Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. Lots of love and kisses, Ella.
Uriah is repairing the minutes of the last Literary Society, which was held last Saturday night. They have some big times debating. I go once in a while to hear them spout. We had rather a nice time over the holidays. We had a Christmas tree at the schoolhouse.
We all went to a Christmas tree on Christmas Eve, and each of us girls got a new red dress and a doll and a string with candy and raisins on it. From your grandchild, Ella.
I suppose you would like to know if we have been grasshoppered again. They were here several days pretty thick and injured the corn considerable. Nebraska would have had a splendid crop if the grasshoppers had stayed away a while. Maddie Oblinger.
The Oblingers had 2 more daughters, Stella and Maggie. But after 6 years on the prairie, things had not gotten easier. And by 1879, Maddie was pregnant again.
She was confined Tuesday evening about 4 o'clock. And about 8 o'clock she took a fit very sudden and never spoke after the first one. The doctors were compelled to perform a surgical operation by relieving her of the child. The Lord called for Sister Mattie this evening at 4:15 o'clock, and she